So let's quickly recap the highlights of the finance minister's address to the nation. Discretionary spending is going to be cut by an additional 10%, 50% cut in fuel coupon allocation for all political appointees effective 1st February, a moratorium on imported vehicles, a moratorium on foreign travels except pre-approved, eliminating ghost names on the payroll. IPP capacity charges will also be reviewed. Capacity that is down from 20%. A moratorium on in new public sector institutions, prioritizing ongoing projects over new projects that the finance minister has also detailed. The finance minister also says they would pursue a comprehensive reprofiling strategies to reduce the interest expense burden on the fiscal. Cabinet has also approved that ministers and heads of SOEs to contribute 30% of their salaries from April to December 2022 to the consolidated fund. They will contribute. So this is it doesn't sound like this is a cut per se. It's a contribution. And this is very specific from April to December, which means that after December, you'll probably expect that they will return to what they used to take. Reducing expenditure on all meetings and conferences by 50% effective immediately. Prioritizing ongoing projects over new projects. And you've also had the impose a moratorium on establishment of new public sector institutions. But also, the government has also proposed today that they intend to wean public tertiary institutions of government payroll and give them some grants instead. I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing what will happen to the fuel price increases that you pay at the pumps. This is what the finance minister announced today. It says to mitigate the impact, the rising price of petroleum products at the pumps, for the next 3 months, government has decided to reduce margins in the petroleum price build-up by a total of 15 pesos per litre, with which will take effect from the 1st of April. And so just 3 months. And so we expect that at the end of the 3 months, it may return to what it used to be at the pumps. So that is it. So what it means that the expected reduction in prices, petrol will go down by 1.6% and diesel by 1.4% also. The MPA is doing some other things to try and bring this down further. As far as revenue goes, the finance minister is very emphatic that they will go to Parliament for the passage of the E-Levy bill, and he just said that he's hoping to do this by the end of March. That's one of the things as far as this is concerned. Winston, let's wrap up. So these are the measures.
Well, 1.6%. Woefully inadequate. One would have expected that, other taxes, for instance, petroleum, sanitation and pollution levy, 10 pesos should not be there at this time. Some other energy sector levies of 20 pesos should not be there at this time because of the challenges that we are faced with. So that's woefully inadequate. I'm interested in winning of public tertiary institutions from the public payroll and the grants. I want to know how much would be giving, to them. When you say you're cutting over 30% of your salaries and contributing it to the consolidated fund, how is that going to be spent? How is that going to help us? Is something I would want to find details, for instance, because you can always say we're cutting it and putting it back into the consolidated fund. You could also decide to cut it, and so you don't pay it at all. And what that would mean will be a reduction in your expenditure. But what I do understand is that if you're putting it back into the consolidated fund, it means you can then spend it on other sectors. Mind you, we're talking about a 30% cut in discretionary expenditure. What's that 30% cut we're talking about? We don't have time, but let me just do this, Evans. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Look, if you look at your total expenditure of 137 billion Ghana cedis, you have compensation of employees at 35 billion cedis. Non-discretionary, you can't touch it. You have interest payments of 37 billion. You can't touch it. That takes you to 72 billion. You can't touch this. You also have grants to other government units, 26 billion. That takes you to 98 billion. You can't touch that also. You have other earmark funds, 5 billion. That takes you to 103 billion. You're left with about 25 billion that you can really touch. So this cut is not as huge as we may think. You're looking at cutting down 30% out of some 25 to 30 billion Ghana cedis. Then finally, you talk about the fact that the minister has talked about all these reductions. We want to see its implementation. Don't just say there is a team monitoring it. We want to see how much you are giving them and how much you're giving them now. If there's anything that should be clear here, it is accountability. We don't have time, so I end it here.
Charles?
Well, Evans, I was expecting the finance minister to tell us how the debt will be brought down in future. Future could be tomorrow or 2 years or 3 years to come. But clearly we didn't see how this will be done. If you look at the savings that would be accrued from these measures, it's not enough to bring the deficit. I'm saying this because if you look at the other report from the World Bank, IMF, we are talking about arrears of about 5%. So clearly the deficit, which is about the deficit target, which the minister pegs it to about 7.45%, is not enough. You get the point I'm making, because if you are going to add these hidden arrears, definitely the deficit is much higher. In terms of the relief, I'm still not happy, because if you look at the petroleum price build-up, I was expecting some of the taxes to be removed. That could have cushioned us further. You understand? You cannot use the argument that Ghana imports 5.2% of oil relatively to import. That is not enough argument, because the issue is we are overburdened now, and you need to cushion us. That is the question most consumers or Ghanaians will be asking for. So fine, these measures will send some level of signaling effect to the market and investors. However, like Winston said, the implementation is very key. We need to have a mechanism to be able to implement this to the core, because that is the only way you can come back and say that you have been able to achieve majority of the measures in place. In conclusion, the E-Levy, I was expecting the rate to come down further. 1.50 is still on the high side, because experiences have shown us in other countries that it has affected mobile money.
Even that is not confirmed yet. I mean, we still have to go to Parliament to now make that reality.
But you see, for me, I've always said that it's a necessary evil. The reason why I'm saying this is that we need more revenue. As we speak, some of the bills have not gone through Parliament. We are almost getting to the end of Q1. We are entering the second quarter. We could face similar challenges in second quarter, which will take us to the second half of the year.
I mean, he's indicated that he expects the E-Levy passed by March. By the way, I mean, there's a lot more that we will be analyzing for you as we all begin to digest what the finance minister had said. And this reminds me of 2014, 2015, when the Setepa's economy was struggling just as this. They also announced a raft of measures such as this, same, very, very similar. Eventually, they still had to go to the IMF then. The finance minister today has been categorical again that no IMF. And so this is what we are banging our hopes on to save the economy. And we have a lot of time to, measure its impact in the coming months. Bless is taking over now with Pulse. Hello, Bless.
Hello, Evans, and for those of you on the Joy News channel, we're grateful that you're staying with us. This is our continuous coverage of the finance minister's address on the economic challenges. What we do know is that government is actually scaling up austerity measures in the wake of an imminent collapse of the economy. Finance Minister Ofori-Atta a couple of hours ago indicated deep cutting measures that will ensure frugality in the public sector. So let's give you some breakdown as to the measures that government is attempting to roll out to deal with the economic challenges. You have that on your screens as we speak. The first point is that there will be some level of reforms as far as discretionary spending is concerned. That will be cut by an additional 10%. So you have that there as part of the measures that government has just announced. The second point is that there will also be a 50% cut in fuel coupon allocations for all political appointees and heads of government institutions, including SOEs, effective 1st of April 2022. And then the third point is that government has also imposed a complete moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles for the rest of the year. So these are the very key 3 points that we're learning from the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, who is giving us much more measures that will be rolled out in the coming days, sector by sector. We'll be breaking all of these down for you here on The Pulse. The Pulse, as always, is brought to you by Global Communities Dignilu, affordable, safe sanitation. Don't forget that we are also this afternoon live on all of our social media handles. It's Joy News on TV and also on YouTube as well. It's the Joy News channel as well. Just be on the lookout for us there, and then we'll go through all of the processes for you. But we have some of the measures, some more measures that the government has been announcing. You have that point 4 is here. The government is also indicating that they will impose a complete moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles for the rest of the year. So that's not the end of the process. If government used to buy vehicles in the past, that's not going to happen, at least for this year, and it's all part of the austerity plans that the minister is announcing to us at this moment. We also do know that there are some more measures, including government deciding that it will impose moratorium on all foreign travels. That has been a subject of controversy. We know about what the minority has been saying in Parliament with regard to the presidential travels and how the president is not mindful of the public purse in that regard. But now we know that all public officials, will see if that would equally apply to the president, but we're not too sure about that. All we know is that for now, government has imposed that ban on foreign travels, except, and here's the exemption, unless it's got to do with pre-approved critical, the word is critical and statutory travel. So, well, if it's in line with law, then you would need to travel. That's what we're getting from the Finance Ministry today. But that's not all. There's also another point that we also need to consider. Point 6 talks about the fact that government will conclude on ongoing measures to eliminate ghost workers from the government payroll by end of December 2022. Some would say this is a mid or a longer term measure or solution to the challenges that we're facing as a country. But considering what experts have been saying about the public sector and a lot in there, you can't just be oblivious of the fact that there are some names that are on the public payroll which need to be dealt with. So definitely that's one of the measures that government is also announcing to us this afternoon. We're also learning that government is concluding the renegotiation of the energy sector IPPs, that's the power producers and those who've been selling to us as a nation. Government has always made the case that we have some non-performing agreement which needs to be reviewed, and that is certainly on the table for the Finance Ministry as part of its grand plan to deal with the concerns. Then we also have the imposition on the of a moratorium on establishment of new public sector institutions by end of April 2022. So definitely we won't see new institutions being set up, and we won't see new government arrangement in terms of bureaucracies that's being announced by the Finance Ministry. There's also point 9 here indicating that priorities on ongoing public projects over new projects as well. That's another consideration from government, which means that additional measures that government is intending to roll out in the coming years, these promises may suffer some setbacks. We're not sure of how deep cutting that will be, because government has made so much promises in the education sector, when it comes to housing, when it comes to issues relating to the economy. Some more measures were announced in the 2022 budget. We're unclear. We're not sure as of now if those priority areas that were announced in the budget will be affected, but that is part of the policy measures that was announced by the Finance Minister. So then we also know that there'll be some reduction in the expenditure on all meetings and conferences by 50% effective immediately. That has also been another concern for experts. The fact that in the public sector there are just so many meetings that do not really yield any results for the state. What's the tangible results that we get from all of these meetings and series of talks that we see MDAs and the MMDAs also carry out across the country. The call is that we need to slash that. Government is today accepting with the posture of some experts to cut that down by 50%. So that would no longer happen in the coming days. Then we know that ministers and heads of SOEs, that state-owned enterprises, are to contribute 30% of their salaries from April to December 2022 to the consolidated fund. This is not the first time we are actually seeing one of these measures. We know that this has been done previously in the previous administration of John Dramani Mahama, where some ministers agreed to give some part of their salaries into the consolidated fund. We know that that money was once more disbursed to all of them at the expiration of the term. What would happen to this very contribution? We're not sure about that, but it looks like this is really deep cutting, because this is not just about ministers of state. It's also got to do with heads of state-owned enterprises. They are contributing 30% of their salaries as part of the austerity measure. So what's going to be the implication of this? Well, the sector minister is telling us that he's optimistic that the Akufo-Addo administration has the capacity to turn around the economy. That's the major reason why the finance minister has been laying out all of these plans.
Of revising the 2022 fiscal framework to reflect current developments with a view to go to Parliament to seek approval for the revisions during the mid-year review in July. Government will pursue additional measures to ensure the achievement of the fiscal deficit target of 7.4% of GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, government had already started the new year with spending cuts as Parliament failed to approve key revenue streams at the appropriate time. In January 2022, government announced and immediately began implementing a 20% expenditure cut as part of fiscal stabilization and debt sustainability measures. This has been done through the quarterly expenditure ceiling allotment to MDAs. Quarter 1 allotment is currently in implementation, whilst Quarter 2 allotment will be issued shortly. The ministry has strengthened its expenditure monitoring systems and processes to ensure effective implementation of these measures. In addition, government has decided to take the following measures to ensure the achievement of the fiscal deficit target of 7.4% of GDP for 2022. So, expenditure cutting measures. Discretionary spending is to be further cut by an additional 10%. The Ministry of Finance is currently meeting with MDAs to review their spending plans for the rest of the 3 quarters to achieve the discretionary expenditure cuts. 2, these times call for very efficient use of energy resources. In line with this, there will be a 50% cut in fuel coupon allocations for all political appointees and heads of government institutions, including SOEs, effective 1st February 2022. With immediate effect, government has imposed a complete moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles for the rest of the year. This will affect all new orders, especially four-wheel drives. We will ensure that the overall effect is to reduce total vehicle purchases by the public sector by at least 50% for the period. Again, with immediate effect, government has imposed a moratorium on all foreign travels except pre-approved critical statutory travels. 5, government will conclude on ongoing measures to eliminate ghost workers from the government payroll by end December 2022. Government will conclude the renegotiations of the energy sector IPP's capacity charges by end of quarter 3 2022 to further reduce excess capacity payments by 20% to generate a total savings of 1.5 billion Ghana cedis.